Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Navis Nobilite. I am Captain Zelnek, and we are continuing our BFG Masterclass with the Tau. Now, I think that it is safe for me to say that there really is no question about the efficacy of a Tau fleet in Battlefleet Gothic. They are astoundingly effective. They've won multiple tournaments. They've managed to build several fleets that are extraordinarily frustrating for people to fight, and that really kind of encompasses the tactics of the Tau in regards to Battlefleet Gothic, which is you are making the board an attrition laden hellhole. It is meant to be a no man's land where the enemy has very little control over their maneuvering, and with that, it can make up for your lack of maneuverability as the Tau. The statement the Tau dominate the ordnance phase is really undisputed. Even the Tyranids, who theoretically have more launch capacity than the Tau, have problems competing with the Tau in the ordnance phase. And this is because their carriers are so astoundingly cheap. Now, we are going to be going over the merchant fleet and the commerce protection fleet here today, but I really want to talk about the element of tactics. Really, the core of competitive Tau play is making the board hell while at the same time covering your weaknesses. And the Tau have two pretty significant weaknesses, and they always revolve around their carriers. They're very dependent on these very large, very vulnerable carriers. The Explorer has a grand sum of exactly one shield, and it has a 4-up rear armor. The Custodian is not as vulnerable, but it only has 10 hits and 3 shields. It's effectively a grand cruiser with poorer maneuverability. Now, between the merchant fleet and the commerce protection fleet, weirdly enough, you're going to be finding a lot more high competitive stuff in the merchant fleet than you are in the commerce protection fleet, solely because their ships are cheaper and they have a far clearer purpose than the commerce protection fleet does. Now, that's not to say that the Protector is bad or the Emissary is bad. Quite the contrary, the Protector is a fantastic cruiser, and the Emissary is vastly superior than the Merchant. But the points of all of these things kinds of falls down in strange ways, making it very hard to truly fill out your fleet with what points you have access to. You're going to find that you're having a lot of 1495 points and a lot of 1480 and not a lot of 1500 exactly. So bear that in mind as we build our fleets. Now, the whole core of the actual tactic for facing off against most enemies, we have to talk about Dark Eldar and we have to talk about Necrons afterwards, is to corral your enemy. You're trying to force them in to positions that are bad, so your bombers and your torpedoes can take advantage of them. This means that we are launching every round. We're heavily dependent on reload special orders. We do not have very good gunnery, unless we go commerce protection, in which case we have mediocre gunnery. We have to bear in mind that we have to utilize a lot of specialized systems in order to make our ships work the best they can, but when they do, and when we get our reloads and we really manage to get a clinch on the ordnance phase, it is very difficult for our enemies to actually fight back in a meaningful way. Now, this is something that I need to impress upon every Tau player out there. Never, in a competitive setting, do you give the first turn to your enemy. I understand that there is tactical sense in allowing the enemy to move first. Never do that. And why do you never do that? Because that gives your enemy one whole round of not having to think about bombers and torpedoes. Those always need to be weighing on the enemy's mind so you can start manipulating how their ships move and function. This is particularly important for the particular weaknesses of the Tau. But your ordnance serves more than simply a means of destroying your enemy. You are also using them to defend your ships and making accessing those ships very dangerous. We don't want the enemy to take advantage of our slow and are slow ships that are poor maneuverability. And by gosh, by golly, they're gonna. They know. Remember, competitive environment. They know exactly how to fight us. So we have to make them fighting us be the bloodiest and most unpleasant circumstance we can. I mean, we have to do everything short of stabbing our opponent to make sure that we outlast them. And that's a very important thing for the Tau, because remember, our battleships, the things that we're supposed to have all of our points invested, are actually about half the cost of your average battleship in this game. So losing an explorer is not actually that much of a points loss when you think about it. It's more of a tactical loss because we're losing so much launch capacity. Now, moving on to the versions of the ships, because the Tau fleet have different versions of all of their ships. The Explorer has 2 versions. The Hero has 2 versions. The Merchant has 2 versions. All of these ships have their purpose, and they're very, very effective. So we have to consider that because they are worth the same amount of points, we need to pick which one is more viable for our tactics. Do we dominate the board with a mountain of mantas, or do we fill it with torpedoes? That's a question that you have to ask yourself, because they're equally viable as a tactic. But rest assured, you need to be launching every round. Torpedoes and bombers and fighters make the board hell. And when it comes to formation, I can't stress this enough. There is never an excuse to have an escort or a cruiser that is outside of formation with the rest of your fleet. Yes, you have to make sure that it can shoot its torpedoes unencumbered. But never be like, I'm going to put this random ship all the way over on the edge of the board, while the rest of my fleet is on the other edge of the board. Why do you never do this? Very simple. The enemy will exploit it. We're not fast enough to maneuver, and we're not fast enough to rejoin the fleet. If you have even a divided fleet, you have your explorers on one end or your hero on the other, that's still a terrible idea. The enemy will go and either kill your explorers, which is the better option, or go and smoke your heroes. You don't even want to divide it evenly, like have a explorer and a hero, an explorer and a hero. They're not strong enough to defend themselves. Only as a unified formation fleet can the Tau adequately defend their assets. Okay? So keep your ships tight, keep them together, and keep your escorts close for screening for enemy escorts, which is very important for things like Necrons and Dark Eldar. Necrons and Dark Eldar escorts are fast enough, turn 1, to get behind you and expose the back of an explorer, forcing you to brace for impact or accept a crippled explorer. You don't want this, okay? You need to have your escorts and your bombers, if they're a Necron player with any kind of escort, you need them sitting behind in the path, whatever path they can take to get behind your explorers, and make it so if they decide to fly through them, they're going to die, or at least lose enough ships that their firepower won't matter after that initial all-ahead full blitz. Also, another important thing for all my Tau players in deployment, there is zero reason on this Earth for you to not place your Tau right on the table edge as far away from the enemy as you can. The very first special order that should be coming out of your mouth is burn retros. You do not want to get any closer to the enemy than you want. Yes, the hero has great firepower. Yes, the protector is phenomenal firepower. A group of emissaries has enough firepower to punch way above its level. It doesn't matter because we're not here for guns. We are here for ordnance. Burning retros does not half your ordnance launch, and it will delay enemies getting within firing by 1 more turn. So turn 1, burn retros on everything that has ordnance, and move your escorts that don't have ordnance, your orcas, your Nikasar, or your wardens, into a position to defend your ships from enemy escorts. And launch, and then launch, and then launch, and launch until the end of the game. There is no reason why you should do anything but launch. if you have an opportunistic moment with a hero or a protector to get good fire on an enemy, maybe you can lock on because they don't have a lot of launch capacity. But for your explorers, for your defenders, for your castellans, for your emissaries, if they aren't the if they aren't the lance torpedo variant, reload, 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 fire torpedo, fire bomber, fire torpedo, fire bomber. Okay, now let us get into our rules and we will talk about our options. So in the merchant fleet, there are no bad choices. The cool thing about the mercantile fleet is that you have a lot of really good options, and we'll go over that. So the most infuriating thing, unironically, is your command structure because the points are weird. Okay, we are very dependent on leadership 9, and 80 points is great. That's 20 points cheaper than the imperial equivalent, but it's a weird points value and doesn't really kind of mesh well with the rest of the fleet. We kind of have to pretend it's 100 points because it has the same value at 100 points, because you don't really get to benefit that much from that discount because of the way the points are valued in this fleet. We have our access to rerolls with 25 and 75 points. All of this is just fluff. The battleships, we have our Explorer. Everybody knows how good the Explorer is. Cheapest launch capacity carrier in the game. It launches resilient bombers. Our fighters are a little slow, but not slow enough to really matter. The other variant is phenomenal. It has a launch capacity 8 torpedo. And remember, Tau synchronized so well with torpedo bombers that it's a viable, if expensive, upgrade to take for either version. When it comes to your cruisers, you have the Hero. You have two variants of the Hero. One of them is nothing but weapons batteries, and the other one is lances and weapons batteries. The lance version is the lances are only at 30 centimeters. All of your weapon batteries are at 45. So messengers are important if you decide to take the battery version, especially if you know the meta has Eldar involved. The Merchant also has two variants. It has one with batteries and grav hooks. The other one has batteries and lances. Also, it's a cheap little ship. You can spend 15 points to increase its hull to 6. Not a bad upgrade if you take Merchants. I mean, it's a good little disposable light cruiser. Well, light, I say with heavy quotations, because it's not very maneuverable, but it does give you grav hooks, or it does give you cheap extra lances. So they're not bad in a squadron. Now, let's actually build a fleet here. Now, obviously, we are going to be focusing on our explorers because we're unlimited on this regard. It must include at least one explorer. Oh no, woe is me. Let's start with taking an essential LD9 commander, okay? We need that reroll. We need that leadership badly, okay? Let's not worry about the extra rerolls. We already have one included. So let's now go for our explorer. Now, the hero, you can take one hero per explorer or merchant. So we're going to take another explorer. Why? Because. Why not? We can take unlimited numbers of them. Now, the question is, are we taking, in this particular regard, the torpedo explorer, or are we taking the bomber explorer, the full launch capacity? In this regard, I'm taking torpedoes, and there's a reason for that. It is because torpedo bombers will make my torpedo salvos even more nightmarish. So it is a total of 60 points per, because it's 15 points for the Tau to upgrade to torpedo bombers. So it's 120 for both. They now have torpedo bombers. I'm now going to add in my two heroes because I can afford them. Now, what kind of heroes am I taking? Personally, in this situation, I am probably going to be taking the standard hero. I like those 4 lances. They're really, really good. And they're really decent stacked up with one another. Now, let's talk escorts. We need escorts desperately. We're going to be taking a messenger. Well, actually, before we take a messenger, let's do our orcas appropriately. So that's 150 for 6 orcas. We should be taking them anyway for screening. And you know what? Ion cannons are a good thing. Okay? Now, we're at 1170. We can now fit in merchants. We can fit in defenders. Now, I'm going to fit in defenders because I just like the idea of more torpedoes on the board. So that's going to be 270 points for a set of defenders, and we are sitting at 1440. Now, in this situation, I'm going to take a messenger. That's very important, because the messenger allows me to re-roll turrets for incoming enemy ordnance, which could save your bacon, despite the fact that we have a lot of launch capacity in this fleet. It's always a good thing to have more defenses in that regard. And we're at 1490, and that's probably going to be where we're going to sit, because that's honestly, when it comes to actual point value across all of the other fleets in the game, we're actually technically sitting at 1510, because this LD9 commander really should be 20 points more expensive. But we're going to exploit the fact that it isn't. And there you go. What is our fleet? 2 explorers, 2 heroes, 6 orcas, 6 defenders. We have a lot of ordnance on this board. We have a lot of torpedoes on this board. The enemy had better have something that can stop it. Now, another important thing to remember. Our torpedoes go between 20 and 40 a round. Our barracudas go 25, which means our barracudas should be flying in front of our torpedo salvos to intercept enemy interceptors. We cannot let them stop our torpedoes. So that's really what your barracudas are really meant to do, at least in the initial salvos of the game. Get out there, defend your torpedoes, and break a hole in the enemy line to allow your torpedoes through to attack the enemy ships. All right, we're now going to go into the Commerce Protection Fleet. Oh, an important note. Nikasar Dows. Nikasar Dows are 45 points. They are a phenomenal escort. Okay? I need to make it abundantly clear. The Dow is the best escort in the game. Okay? The Dow are insanely strong. They have 2 shields, 5 up armor, 180 degree turns, and a port and starboard strength 3 weapons battery. Okay? They are, as a squadron, a rock that is almost impossible to kill, because the amount of firepower that the enemy will have to dedicate to destroying them, it will roughly be their entire fleet, probably for multiple rounds, just because they're just so dang hard to kill, and their firepower is good enough that they can't ignore them. So, I cannot stress this enough. If you decide to bring your Dows, they are expensive. They're just as expensive as the Defender. Recognize that what they are meant to be is something that the enemy just cannot kill. It is a points sponge. It's a gun sponge. It's a bullet sponge. That's the term. A bullet sponge. So recognize though that only the generalized grav hooks on the Merchant and on the Explorer can take them. Or you can take, I think you can take in the Commerce Protection Fleet, you can take Nikasar rigs, but broadly speaking, we're not really caring about that because the rigs themselves are too expensive to take in competitive play. Now, moving into the Commerce Protection Fleet. This fleet is a hybrid fleet. It allows you to take from either fleet. You can take the new or the old, which gives us some tactical advantages, okay? Now, when it comes to the comparative ships, right, we have the Protector versus the Hero, the Emissary versus the Merchant, right? The Castellan versus the Defender, and the Warden versus the Orca. Broadly speaking, with the exception possibly of the Protector, the new Tau ships are broadly better, but they are more expensive. The Warden is superior to the Orca. Why? The lance fires front, left, right. The Castellan is better than the Defender. Why? Because its Strength 2 weapons batteries fire at 45 centimeters and it has a 90 degree turn. The Custodian is broadly better than the Explorer. Why? It has torpedoes, it has launch capacity 6, it has 3 shields and 5 up armor and 6 up armor gravitic prow. It is a superior vessel, okay? But that does not mean that the other ships don't have uses. The Hero has 4 prow ion cannons and can get a significantly better it has 8 hits. It's a much tougher ship too. So it functions effectively as your battle cruiser. Like, consider the Hero a battle cruiser. If you can afford it, if it fits in your fleet, take it and treat it as a battle cruiser, okay? Now, the Emissary blows the Messenger out of the water in every way. Yes, it only has 4 hits. You cannot make it more, but the options are infinitely better. It is either grav hooks, launch capacity, or a beautiful little torpedo and lance boat, which is what I take every single time. So the uh the options are very clear with a couple of exceptions. If I'm going to be building a fleet out of this, again, we're going to have points juggling issues because they don't mesh very well. I am going to be absolutely taking from the original list the Explorer. I'm going to definitely take Heroes, but I'm not going to take Merchants, I'm not going to take Orcas, and I'm not going to take Defenders. I'm going to take my more maneuverable, more valuable newer ships in that regard. But also, there's nothing stopping you from taking a Custodian. Now let's talk about command. Obviously, we have options of the Tau Kor-El LD8, the Kor-O LD9, and Kor-O Mesmi. Mesmi is one of those commanders that gives you way more stuff than his point value permits. You have to put him on a Custodian. Oh no, woe is me. But what do you get? Well, he has a reroll. He has a second reroll, I believe, from his on-O, and he makes your bombers skilled and your fighters resilient. He can also take improved logic engines on his ship, which permits him to ignore leadership effects from blast markers, which is a big deal for the Tau. He is a very good commander. He is 30 points more expensive than a standard Kor-O. I don't mean to be crass, but that is way underpointed for what you get. But he is still expensive, and our rule is we try to compress all of our stuff into as many ships as possible. So taking Kor-O is a bit of a gamble, but let's build a fleet with him, okay? So he is 110 points, and he has to take a Custodian at 320 points. So we're already at 430. We're almost a third of our fleet. Now, I am going to be a little cheeky here because... No, actually, I'm going to take that back. I'm not going to be cheeky with this. I'm not going to give it torpedo bombers because torpedo bombers don't have any benefit from his abilities. So we're going to leave that stock. We're going to take a explorer because it's an explorer and we need to dominate the ordnance phase. And now we are at 660. We need to be filling this now with our wardens. We have to cram wardens in here. So that is a 180 points. Boom. Okay. That is going to be our bare minimum right now for escorts because, again, this fleet a little more cruiser oriented. So we're going to now take a protector at 185. Now, which version of the protector? It's really up to you. They're all very viable. I tend to use the one that doesn't have all 45 weapons. I prefer to take a little more firepower as opposed to all long-range firepower. But don't forget that your Custodian has the tracking systems of the Messenger. So bear that in mind. Okay, but that's our Protector. I'm going to take another Protector here. And then I think I'm going to take some Emissaries. Now, why am I taking Emissaries? Because they are a very effective little light cruiser. Emissaries can absolutely ruin an enemy's day. They, especially if you take the Torpedo Lance variant, they're small, unassuming, easily ignored, but they have good torpedo strength, and in a squadron, they can really mess things up. Now, we're at 75 points. We have a couple of choices. We can take a messenger if we want, or we can go and see how expensive. Let's go up to Mesmi really quick and see how expensive his additional rerolls. He has 2 rerolls because he always has his buddy with him. Let's take that improved logic engine, because there's no reason not to. So that's his only option. We're now at 75 points left. We are going to take a messenger at 50 points to help support our fleet, and we're at 1485. And that's going to have to probably be as good as it gets if we're taking Mesmi. Now, if we're not going to take Mesmi, we're going to take a different fleet. All right? So let's get back down to the right fleet real quick. Okay, we're going to take a standard Kor-O at 80 and take our Custodian at 320. Now, at this situation, I am going to spend the 120 points to give that thing torpedo bombers. And then we're going to take a standard Explorer. We're going to then take a Hero and a squadron of Castellans. We're at 1230. You know what? I'm going to increase that by 1 Protector. And we're at 1410. Now we can give him 2 rerolls. Nothing wrong with that at all. We could. Unfortunately, that's kind of what we're falling into. Again, we're falling into the weird zone of not being able to fit things into places because the points values are weirdly balanced. This is mostly an effect of the grav hooks. But you know what? What we can do is put in 3 wardens. Boom. 1485. And we're back at that weird zone of 1485. Now, this fleet is a different choice of a very similar fleet. We have a lot more torpedoes because we have the torpedo bombers coming out of the Custodian. We have the Castellans, which is just a beautiful, nasty little block of hate, which is always a good thing. And we have a couple of wardens to help us give a screen, and 3 lances and a strength 6 battery is nothing to frown at. All right, but remember, if you need a refresher about what's important about flying the Tau in high competitive environments, please watch the beginning of the video again. You have to keep your guys in a nice, tight formation. The enemy has to come to you, and every step they take, they have to suffer. All right, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all again in the next video. Bye-bye.